good to see all of you. Welcome, welcome, welcome from the bottom of my heart. Welcome. So glad that you are here to join us tonight. Be sure to hit that like button. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. Be sure to hit the notifications bell because a lot of you are probably here right now because of notifications. So you want to get that notifications bell. A lot going on, folks, but you're going to be seeing a lot of me. I'm trying to do as many streams as I can these days because streaming is important. Wow, folks, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. I'm so glad I'm here in my lovely Brooklyn apartment, and we are going to have a chat about a couple things. The way it works here is I give my opening remarks. Then from there, we do the roll call where I call you out as I see you, names and locations. And then from there, we do our super chat questions. I answer the super chat questions until the show is over. That's how we do it here. That is how we do it here. It's been a great day, and I'm once again chatting with all of you. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. I'll jump into my opening remarks, and then after I give my opening remarks, at that point, I will then do the roll call, and then I'll answer your super chat questions. So I'm here in my lovely Brooklyn apartment. Here is the famous pen from which I will write down the famous super chats. So send a super chat if you have a question, you got something you want me to touch on. By all means, send me a super chat. That's the way to get me to talk about it. And with no further ado, we will roll into our opening remarks. Folks, I just wanted to start out by saying that there was a great gathering in New York City today, but they were happening all across the country. March for Medicare for All. And I went to the rally, and you can see on this channel my interviews with folks who was there, interviews with some other folks, the John Brown volunteers. They got some footage, and it's a great little video we compiled. I cut out the best parts, 6 minutes there of people that took to the streets to march for Medicare for All. It's an effort spawned by Jimmy Dore, spawned by Jackson Hinkle and Frank Analysis and Convo Couch, and it's that section of the Bernie movement that actually believes in the Bernie Sanders cause, like, Medicare for all and healthcare for all, the people who actually believe in it, not the grifters, not the Young Turks, not the AOC shills, but the people who actually believe in it. The Bernie Sanders folks who truly believe in what they're saying, even though Bernie has sold them out, even though AOC has sold them out, the ones who actually want to fight for healthcare for all, they took to the streets. Today. It was great. It was really, really great. Interview said the major difference between Marxists and anarchists was the groups they organized. All right, Marxists, anarchists, groups they organized. Very good question, Chaya. And wrote it down. So it was a great gathering. Great to go to these things. I don't often like to go to left-wing rallies because, as you know, there are many people who have the wrong impression about me. There's been a relentless smear campaign against me. But I went. I saw some people that I knew. I met some of you who I've never met before, people that are part of this online community, that are part of our Government of Action, Fight for Working Families, unnamed diet beverage gang. I met some of you. That was really, really cool. A few people asked me for selfies. That was really neat. The John Brown volunteers, they were out and, distributing buttons and distributing palm cards and distributing the Green Book by Gaddafi. They sold out. They ran out of Green Books by Gaddafi. They sold the CPI edition of the Green Book by Gaddafi, and they sold out. They got so many of them out. It was a lovely day. One thing that struck me, I must say, about the demonstrations, was I used to go to rallies like this all the time. I don't really go to protests and stuff. I'm not an activist. I was there as a press. I was there to cover it. But I don't really go to rallies and protests anymore. Not my milieu. I'm not a protest dude. I'm starting a think tank. I write articles and stuff, but I'm not in the protest milieu. During the Occupy Wall Street years and before that, I used to be going to rallies around police brutality a lot in Cleveland, and then I was going to Occupy Wall Street protests and anti-war rallies all the time. There's footage of me yelling, and at anti-war protests. I was on CNN representing the movement against the bombing of Syria. But I'm not going to protests much these days. May 4th movement. May 4th movement change China. Good question. And, one thing that struck me was that, this was a decent sized march, few hundred people marching for Medicare for all. Big delegation from the Communist Party. The Communist Party USA sent a number of people, which is interesting because you didn't used to see the Communist Party USA. That was the one group you did not see. They didn't march around in their own name. They kind of, they were kind of hidden almost. You never saw the Communist Party. But what you did see is there would be like 1,000,000 of these little tiny Trotskyite groups, anarchist groups, Iran protests, color revolution, little Trotskyite groups, anarchist groups, Maoist groups. There used to be, you'd go to anything at all left-wing, an anti-war protest, a labor union rally, anything that seemed at all left-wing, and there would be 1,000,000 little tiny commie groups trying to sell you their paper, right? And, the Spartacist League and the ISO and the QWH and the XYZ and the Revolutionary Communist Party and the Revolutionary Workers League and the Spark and the Workers the Workers International League and there used to be 1,000,000 of these, right? I remember the first time I went to a protest, the first time I ever visited New York City, ever in my life. I was a senior in high school, and me and my good buddy, who is now was studying music, was a guitar player, friend of mine. We took the bus. Anarchism, infantile disorder. We took the bus, and we went up to a big anti-war protest in New York City. And every corner of the city, we marched from Broadway, from up past 42nd Street, Times Square, all the way down to Lower Manhattan. Seemed like everywhere we went, there was an older guy, it'd be an older gray-haired person in their 70s saying, it's about the workers and the bosses. It's about the capitalists and it's about the workers against the capitalists, the class struggle. It's about the working class. We got to fight to seize the means of production. There seemed to be somebody with one of those, those old Brooklyn, New York City accents. We, the workers got to fight the bosses, the billionaires, the ruling class. We need class struggle, the proletariat. It's the proletariat. There used to be one of these old folks who was a lifelong commie. Those folks have all just died off, or I guess they're in the old folks' home, and they were great people. As much as I get frustrated with the baby boomers are still around. They're around. The boomers are still around. These people were about a decade or two older than the baby boomers. They could remember World War II, maybe remember the 30s, and these folks were gold. And you would see them, and they were old folks and raggly beards and long hair and old women, and they'd be out there, we got to do what Trotsky said. Leon Trotsky said, they were adorable folks. They were really, really adorable folks. And some of them were Maoists, and some of them were Trotskyites, and some of them were, they were all over the place. But, you couldn't go to anything left-wing without 500 of these people, these little tiny communist groups running up to you and trying to sell you a newspaper and trying to get you to spend $1 to buy the latest issue of a newspaper with Worker or Revolution in the title, and and those folks are gone. and it's kind of heartbreaking. It's good that the Communist Party was there. I interviewed a few people from the Communist Party. I'm not in the Communist Party. I'm not in any political party, but it's good that the Communist Party had a good number of folks there. That's good. I like to see the Communist Party being active. The Communist Party has a great history, and of all the groups that are out there, the Communist Party, the Party of Communists, the PSL. Those are the folks that are more or less where I'm at. I'm doing my own thing, right? CPI, we have a completely different approach. We're trying to save socialism so that socialism can save America. U.S. labor aristocracy. That's what we're doing. But of all the groups out there, these are the groups that kind of but but yeah, it's just kind of shocking to me that I didn't see, because I swear, when I was, 19, 20 years old, you went to anything. If there'd been a march for Medicare for all, it would have been swarming with Spartacists and Trotskyites and Maoists and none of that. You, you know, none of that. None of it. None of it. None whatsoever. There you go. And it was shocking. It was shocking to me to see how So there you go. Okay, what kind of urban planning? Socialists advocate. It was just shocking to me that I didn't see those folks. But there was a great number of folks. What is this? I lost my hat. I don't even know what you're talking about there, Peter. I can't write it down because I don't know what it is. I don't think I lost my hat. The hat that I took with me to the rally is right here. Did not lose the hat. It's right here. So you're super chatting me that I lost my hat. Didn't lose my hat. It's right here. I've got 100% proof. Peter, you are wrong. You are wrong, good sir. You are wrong. You said I lost my hat, but the hat is right here. Aha. I'm always one to pull a hat trick. Aha. Aha. Don't try to put that on me. Anyway, there you go. So, anyhow, regardless, it was interesting to be out there. Now, I also heard that today, I didn't go, obviously, but I heard today that there was a rally by the anti-vaxxers, the people that are opposing the lockdowns, the Worldwide Rally for Freedom, gathered in Central Park, and that among them, and this is New York City, mind you, among these folks, you had the Proud Boys, the white supremacist group. They revealed themselves. You had the Falun Gong, the crazy right-wing religious cult that runs the Epoch Times newspaper and is just seething with anti-communism. And they had this worldwide rally for freedom in Central Park, and they were saying lockdowns are communism. That was kind of their message, that the lockdowns, which have definitely hurt working people, they may be necessary, but they've certainly hurt working people's lives. Their message to the people of New York was that the lockdowns are communism, are somehow communist. The lockdowns are communism. And so they're out on the streets these days as well. So there you go. There you go. So, I want to say, the John Brown volunteers, they're on the streets of New York. They're doing great work, and you're going to be hearing more from them pretty soon. Some great plans are in the works. You're going to learn more about them and what they do. So they're doing great work. And it was good to, see the folks. And if you want to check out the rally, just go. It's like the previous video, the latest video on my channel. Is the video from the rally where I was asking people at the rally what it was like, and it was good to talk to folks, and it was it was a lot of folks who really believe in what the Bernie Sanders movement stands for, right? Maybe, they're not communists, not socialists, but they really believe in it. Older folks, younger folks who want Medicare for all, and are a little bit annoyed. And what's weird is a lot of the voices that were big in in supporting Erwan, that were big in supporting Bernie Sanders when he was running, were denouncing these marches, right? All the young Turks and all those folks, that have been denouncing the call for force the vote, the call for Medicare for all. It's like these people were okay with Bernie running on a platform of doing it, but now they have just thrown nothing but dirt at Jackson Hinkle, nothing but dirt at Convo Couch, nothing but dirt at Jimmy Dore and all the folks that have continued to beat the drums. A lot of the people that jumped on the Bernie wagon were grifters, right? They were just straight up grifters who were just they talked a good game when there was no consequences for doing so. But when there suddenly became consequences for doing so, suddenly they stopped. When Bernie was running and they were all for Bernie, and then Bernie lost, and then they were all for Biden, sure. But now that the issue of healthcare is a big issue, okay, Proud Boys, anti-Wall Street, anti-socialism. Now that there's consequences for this, all the grifters are opposed to it, right? And that's very dangerous. We need to fight the fake left. We need to expose the fakes speaking in the name of socialism. The people that are on the internet every day trying to tell people that Jimmy Dore is the same as David Duke. That if you actually want what the Bernie movement stood for, you're a Nazi. There you go. What's it? NATO bombing in Yugoslavia. All right, NATO bombing in Yugoslavia. All right, and what red tube did I watch for research? So there you go. Alrighty. So there you go. So that's my report on that. I'm glad to see that outpouring of people. I'm glad to see that people are organizing and protesting again. Glad to see it. Really, really glad to see it. Now, a couple other things I wanted to mention. I have a subscription. I don't know when it's going to run out. I have a subscription to The Economist magazine. And so something I've done in the past is, in the front of The Economist magazine, we have The World This Week in Politics, right? Where they just, they have a summary of what's going on in the world. So one thing that I've often done is I have just kind of gone over a few of the things in here with my commentary. So, right, to help your arguments for healthcare over in the U.S. here since Australia, we've had Medicare since 1983. Very good. Australia, or since, 1983, yes. Australia, Medicare since 1983. We'll definitely talk about that, David. Very good. Shout out to you, David Fox, a very good friend of the program. How is proletarian patriotism supposed to appeal to black people? Proletarian patriotism appeal to black people. Very good. Alrighty. So, for the remainder of my opening remarks, I'm just going to go over a few news items from this world in politics and tell you the part that the neoliberal economists who put out Economist magazine are not telling you. News item number 1. The worst flooding to hit Europe since the Second World War has left at least 200 people dead. Okay. Why did Stalin kill Trotsky? Writing it down. Alrighty. The worst flooding to hit Europe since the Second World War has left at least 200 people dead, with many more still unaccounted for. The bulk of the deaths occurred in Germany, where days of exceptionally heavy rains caused rivers to burst their banks. Belgium saw 36 deaths. Germany's complex federal system, with responsibility divided between federal, state, and local governments, seems to have been a big part of the problem. Early warning systems failed. Okay. Now, even that, right? This is supposed to be just the summation of this week in politics. But did you notice the way that was summed up? Germany's complex federal system, with responsibility divided between federal, state, and local governments, seems to be a big part of the problem. Early warning systems failed. The other thing that we've been hearing about the flooding in Germany is that it was caused by climate change, right? That seems to be the talking point. Climate change caused the flooding, and government bureaucracy, big government bureaucracy, failed to give a response. Folks, let me tell you something. Did, climate change have an effect on some of the erratic weather that we're having? Yes, probably. I mean, it would make sense. Did, the Germany's government structure fail in response to this? Clearly. Is the answer austerity and cutting social spending? No! Hell no! If anything, what we need now is better infrastructure. What they need in Germany is better storm levees, better flood infrastructure, more. How in the world can you turn there was a big flood and a bunch of people died into we need to cut government spending and everyone needs to be poorer because you're eating up Mother Earth? This is you cannot. This is what they're taking from it. A bunch of people died in Germany because of flooding. And instead of saying, oh, geez, maybe we should build better storm levees. Oh, gee, maybe we should hire more emergency relief workers. Somehow they have turned the fact that German society failed in response to flooding into we got to get rid of government jobs and we've got to drive down living standards. Everyone just has too much and it's taking its toll on the environment. So everyone's got to be poorer. Plus we've got to cut the jobs of all kinds of government people. This is insanity. This is how blatant the austerity degrowth propaganda is, right? Climate change. Sure. Let's talk about it. That's not, it's not like the most pressing issue here. The most pressing issue is if this happens again, 200 people could die. And furthermore, the government bureaucracy being inefficient. How about the fact that we need more services? We need to make no, but this is how demented the austerity folks who push The Economist and who dominate political discourse in the United States really are. There's a storm levy. They didn't have proper flooding infrastructure. They did not have, the emergency services failed, and somehow from that we should all be poorer. We should have more government employees, more rescue workers. We should have a more efficient and bigger social safety net. On top of that, maybe we need, people to have more, and so they're better fortified for the storms. This is how sick the ruling class is, right? They never let a good crisis go to waste. And their narrative now, their official narrative, is that somehow the fact that there has been mass flooding in Germany means we should cut social spending. That's what they mean. That cut the jobs of government workers, make everyone poorer and have less and reduce consumption because of climate change. That's their solution to this flooding crisis. And that shows you how deeply embedded the neoliberal economic narrative is, right? Somehow mass flooding doesn't mean more government jobs, more government spending, more protection for communities. Oh no, it means we all need to have less. So there you go. That is their solution. And that's outrageous. Since the fall of the Soviet Union, they've been trying to dismantle the welfare states in Europe, reduce the role of government. It's nowhere near as bad as it is over here because they have a strong labor movement, because they have strong left-wing parties and organizations. But that's the neoliberal response to the flooding. Horrifying. Absolutely horrifying. Ariel Henry was sworn in as Haiti's new prime minister after Claude Joseph stepped down as interim leader. This came 2 weeks after the assassination of President Moïse, who handed over leadership to Mr. Henry just before his death. Mr. Joseph returned to his role as foreign minister, not mentioning that Moïse was imposing brutal austerity on the people of Haiti and helping Haiti be looted by the big banks and corporations that run the United States, not mentioning that Moise had been in office unconstitutionally and was basically a dictator, not mentioning that all the people of Haiti had been rising up and protesting against him for months and months and months prior to his assassination, not mentioning that the team who assassinated him had a whole bunch of former Colombian military folks plus 2 U.S. citizens of Haitian descent among them. Yeah, just assassination. I mean, yeah, the lead up to the death of Moise was months and months of protest. And on this channel, if you watch this channel, you would know about that. I interviewed Danny Shaw, who was on the ground talking to these folks about what happened. I mean, he was on the ground as the people of Haiti were fighting against the austerity regime that the United States was backing. The USA was backing Moise as he looted the country, as the people got poorer and more desperate and more hungry, rioting in the streets over fuel prices and such. The U.S. government was backing Moise. Exact moment I became a communist. Alrighty. Okay. Yeah, there you go. Right. It should be the Haiti's austerity president Moise was assassinated after months and months of demonstrations, and the assassination itself looks a little bit shady. But there you go. Next item: Pedro Castillo was declared the president-elect of Peru. The Electoral Authority made the announcement several weeks after he won the vote in a tight race, after it assessed allegations of electoral fraud made by his right-wing rival, Fujimori. She now says she will accept the result. That's right. Pedro Castillo, a city builder, a socialist, an anti-imperialist, a progressive, a real socialist with a real working-class populist economic platform, has been declared the winner and the president of Peru. This is a great victory. And, every effort was made to try and allege this wasn't a real election, And when they mention his right-wing rival, Kiku Fujimori is the daughter of a brutal dictator. Her father was the military dictator of Peru, who slaughtered people, murdered people. He was an austerity dictator. So, that's a little interesting. Yes, that's a great victory for the people. There you go. Right? There you go. At least 30 people were killed when a bomb exploded in a market in Baghdad. The Islamic State claimed responsibility. It was the deadliest such bombing in the Iraqi capital since January. Yeah, U.S. intervention just worked out so well in Iraq, right? Iraq, there was this evil dictator named Saddam Hussein, and we had to go and just rescue the people. And things in Iraq have been so great ever since, haven't they? Right? The U.S. invaded Iraq in 2003, and it's nearly 20 years later, and things have just been getting better and better and better. Did you remember that Condoleezza Rice, she called it the birth pangs of a new Middle East? The birth pangs of a new Middle East. Oh, this is going to be the beginning. Iraq is going to be a new democratic country, and the people are going to get their freedom. I went in there we will not stop until your people are free. Until your free people is free. We're going to overthrow the dictator Saddam Hussein. We're going to give you some of that American-style freedom. We're going to make America great again. We're going to invade. It's going to become an amazing country. Iraq is going to be awesome. Mission accomplished. Yeah, and look at Iraq now. We got bombs going off. We got ISIS and Al-Qaeda. It's just going so great. Just so great. Just like Afghanistan. You notice that? Afghanistan, ever since the USA invaded Afghanistan, things in Afghanistan have been amazing for opium poppy dealers. If you are an opium poppy dealer, if you're a heroin producer, things are great. If you're like a normal person in Afghanistan, not so much. Things have been pretty bad, actually, but yeah, as long as you're a certified drug lord, things in Afghanistan have been awesome since the USA invaded. But since then, for everybody else in the country, things have been getting worse and worse and worse. Terrorist groups, starvation, death, murder, drug gangs, terrorism, big mess, right? Oh, remember Syria? Remember Syria, right? Syria, right? This country that was, that was a prosperous country, but then we heard, oh, Bashar Assad's a dictator. He's using chemical weapons. Oh, you can't disagree with that. It must be true. The UN and the United States said it, and so the USA started arming extremists to overthrow the Syrian government, and then Donald Trump hit the Syrian government with cruise missiles, and Israel's been lobbing cruise missiles at Syria. How have things been going in Syria ever since then, right? Ever since this operation to spread human rights to Syria has been going, things have just been great, just tremendous in Syria for ISIS, just tremendous in Syria for Al Qaeda. Not so much for the Syrian people, though. The Syrian people, not so good. Not so good. Oh, and you remember Libya? You remember that? You remember how Gaddafi was supposedly handing out Viagra so his soldiers could rape women, and then we found out that was a big hoax, and Amnesty International said, yeah, that never happened, and Hillary Clinton said, oh my God, we got to invade, and everyone, oh, and they told Obama, oh my God, they're going to go house to house in Benghazi, and they're going to kill people, and you remember that? Remember that and how that didn't happen? And look at Libya now. How's Libya doing, right? Slave markets, people drowning in the Mediterranean trying to get out, hunger, poverty, instability. Why do people keep falling for this? May I ask, why do people keep falling for this? Right? I mean, I want to play that old song by The Who, We Won't Get Fooled Again. Because, how many times are you going to fall for this? And every time, it's the same story. Oh my God, the evil dictator is torturing these people, and we have to have a heart and bomb and invade. We have no choice. It's our moral obligation as America. And I swear, every time, people fall for this. People fall for this. The same script is used. The evil dictator, weapons of mass destruction, terrorist, blah, 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 blah. And then the USA goes in there, rips the country to shreds, blows it to bits, and you've got terrorists, and you've got drug gangs, and you've got instability, and you've got chaos, and there you go, right? I mean, it's just, how many times, right? And what was always there beforehand? There was always an independent government, right? Okay, pessimism, aestheticism, glorification of suffering. There was always an independent government that was trying to raise the people out of poverty with some level of economic development, right? Ba'ath socialism in Iraq, in Libya, the Islamic socialist system, Ba'ath socialism in Syria. The Syrian government is still intact despite everything that they've thrown at them. In Honduras, the USA toppled Manuel Zelaya. The USA intervened in Haiti to topple Aristide, and look how great things are in Haiti these days. I mean, over and over and over again, these U.S. military interventions to prop up and defend the global system called imperialism, capitalism in its monopoly stage, the domination of the world by banks and corporations based in Western countries. These interventions happen, these military interventions, and it's supposedly done to help the people there, and the people end up getting worse. Things for the people get worse. The people of these countries that are targeted do not benefit from these interventions. They don't. They don't benefit from these interventions. They don't. And I don't know how many times, you have to know this, right? I mean, how many times are we going to fall for this? But anyway, next, moving on to the next question. Right? India has suffered some 4 million excess deaths since the beginning of the pandemic, around 10 times more than official figures show. The government study found that more than 2/3 of Indians had COVID-19 antibodies, again suggesting the official figures vastly understate the scale of the pandemic. Well, what region did the best in resisting the pandemic? That region would be Kerala, right? Kerala, the part of India that's run by the Communist Party. They did an amazing job dealing with the pandemic, right? Because they have a government of action that fights for working families. So there you go. There you go. So that's a detail you're not going to hear on mainstream television. But the communist region of India did an amazing job handling the pandemic, just like the Chinese communists did an amazing job handling the pandemic, just like the Vietnamese communists did an amazing job handling the pandemic, just like the Cuban and Venezuelan communists did an amazing job handling the pandemic, whereas Western capitalism fell on its face. Why? Because the health of one is the health of all. The health of one is the health of all. We're all in this together. Human beings are collective creatures. And the attitude of capitalism, that we're all atomized individuals, sink or swim, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Well, it's not going to work, right? Socialism. Versus become John Brown volunteer. Very good. All righty. Very, very good. So there you go. There you go. I just wanted to mention that, right? That this attitude that we have, that we're all atomized individuals, you're all on your own, sink or swim, that attitude doesn't solve society-wide problems like pandemics, like flooding, right? We, as human beings, have to learn to address problems collectively, right? Collectively. Human beings, as a species, are collective in nature. And the capitalist attitude that everyone's on their own, not going to cut it. Not going to cut it. And that concludes my opening remarks for tonight, but you've all asked me some great super chat questions. Keep the super chats rolling in. I'm going to take a drink of unnamed water beverage. And now we'll do our roll call. Oh, wow, I got to write down a couple super chats here. So, speaking of India, are you familiar with M.K. Stalin? Okay, so M.K. Stalin. All right. All right. And New Zealand's high standard of living and social democracy. All right. New Zealand's high standard of living. All right. Writing them down. All right. All right. Laos. Socialism. All right. All right. Very good. Very, very good. And now I have to read off the names and locations. Now I was writing down those super chats. Max on the Metro. Yes, Caleb. Yes, Caleb. College Park, Maryland. Chaya. Arturo, Anchorage, Alaska. Ryan in Oakland. JT24 in Mississippi. Flushing, Queens. Cincinnati, Ohio. Jenny Lynn, Vallejo, California. Right? Jeff in Grand Canyon, Arizona. Bendigo, Australia. David Fox. Dan from Illinois. Spinning Through Space. Welcome, welcome. New Jersey, New Zealand. Learning in Northern California. Brian Schaefer in Illinois. Southern California. Richmond, Virginia. British Columbia, Canada. Arkansas. Cameron Smith, the man and the myth, in New Haven, Connecticut. Welcome, Cameron. Daniel in Southern California. Tony in Tasmania. Right? California, Dylan Small. Mo in Toronto. Covina, California. Joey from Belize. Vinicius from Brazil. All right, Christian from northern New Jersey. Lurker in southern Illinois. Welcome, Mr. Lurker. Morning all. Martin in Ireland. Long Island City, Queens. 31st Century Socialism. Welcome. Morgan in Indianapolis, Michigan. Temple City, California. Los Angeles. Norristown, Pennsylvania. Larry Fine. Calgary, Canada. Alan in Chicago. Anthony Penza in Cleveland. North Carolina. A.J. Leland. John in Houston. Joey in New Zealand. Adelaide, Australia. Dana Annex in Chicago. Welcome, Dana. I think I'll make you a mod. You're now a mod, Dana. All right, Australia, UK. Nellie Curry. Balthazar in Oakland. Mohsin from Iran. Philip Hoskins in Tennessee. Los Angeles, Christian from New Jersey. Io Hillary in New York, good friend of the program. Welcome, Io. Auckland, New Zealand. Jack and Kill, home of the crack pills. All right, that's one thing I thought I would never see. That's Jilt Green, said Jack and Kill, home of crack pills. All righty then. California, Bay Area, San Francisco, Washington State, Tennessee. Bayonne's Broadway Diner in Bayonne, New Jersey. I've been out to Bayonne. That's neat. Julian in Sussex, UK. Memo in Ukiah, California. Melbourne, Australia. Detroit, Michigan. Los Angeles, Mexico City. Hopper in Southern California. Cleveland Pirate Alex, Dublin, Ireland. Springfield, Missouri. London Calling. Tristan, parasocialite in Maryland. Shout out to you, Tristan. Great friend of the program. So glad you are with us. You're awesome out there. You're doing great stuff. Tacoma, Washington. Derek Williams is with us. Jacksonville. All right. Very good. Jacksonville. All right. Round Rock, Texas. Daniel is with us. Round Rock, Texas. Columbia, Missouri. Carlos Pena in California. Very good. Carlos Pena is with us. Welcome, Carlos. All right, everybody, be sure to hit the like button. Oh, San Angelo Solidarity is in the house. San Angelo Solidarity. Welcome, San Angelo folks. Very, very good. Everyone be sure to hit that like button. Be sure to hit the subscribe button. Be sure to hit the notifications bell. There's a weird algorithm on YouTube where they unsubscribe people. Fight against that. Push back. Hit the subscribe button. Liam in Scotland is with us. It must be late over there in Scotland. Glad you're with us, right? Liam in Scotland. Be sure to hit the like button, the subscribe button. If you want to make this a bigger conversation, hit the like, send this out, post this on your Facebook, post this on your Reddit, post this on Instagram. Fernando says, more power to you, Campbell. Well, thank you, Fernando. Doing the best we can. Tweet this out, post this on Instagram, post this in Reddit groups. Very, very good. All righty. So now, I'm going to start answering some of these questions. All right. Marxists, anarchists, and how you said they were different because of the groups they organized. Well, nowadays, you wouldn't realize this because nowadays it's a little bit different. But back in the time of Peter Kropotkin, back in the time of Vladimir Lenin, back in the time of Marx, the major difference between communists or Marxists and anarchists was who they thought would be the base of the revolution. Peter Kropotkin, people like that, believed it would be the peasantry, the rural population, the peasants fighting for their own land, fighting against the nobility and the landlords. They thought they would be the basis of the revolution, whereas Marxists said it was the proletariat, the industrial worker, would be the basis of the revolution. And this was the primary difference. And in the Spanish Civil War, that was one of the primary differences between the Marxists and the anarchists. The anarchists were fighting for the peasantry against the landowners. The anarchists were fighting for the peasantry against the landowners. The Marxists were in the cities, working on behalf of the factory workers and building labor unions. And that anarchist movements in Europe during this time primarily focused on the peasantry. In Russia, you had the Narudniks, or the People's Revolutionary Party, or the Friends of the People, they were called, the Narudniks. Sometimes it's mistranslated as the populists. That's not a very good translation. Those folks, they thought the revolution would come from the countryside. And it was the Marxists who said it would come from the city. Can you tell us the story of Spartacus? Oh, sure, I can tell you the story of Spartacus. The story of Spartacus. All right. Story of Spartacus. All righty. Great stuff, folks. Great stuff. All right. So, that's historically been the difference. Now, I would argue nowadays, right? Nowadays, there's also a difference in this area, but it's different. I don't think the anarchists are going out and organizing the peasantry anymore, right? There's not much of a peasantry these days. Anarchists, they do tend to focus on counterculture nowadays. Nowadays, it seems like counterculture is the focus of a lot of anarchist organizing. There's a documentary that was widely promoted, Building Community in New York, and, it was all about, they want to build their little cooperatives, their little community gardens, etc. Whereas, Marxists generally want to work in the labor movement, or they want to build Marxist groups. And I argue out of the movement into the masses. I argue we need to resist the counterculture, right? We need to resist the counterculture, the lumpen tendencies, etc. And we need to get to average people. And that's, it's those who produce the wealth of the country, right? The the working class, the working families. Those are the ones who ultimately will be the backbone of a Marxist revolution, right? It is the workers, the workers, those who, average working people need to become socialists, not hippies, not college professors, but average working class families in the United States need to say, you know what, socialism is the right idea for us. We need to get out of the movement and get to the masses. And the anarchists nowadays, back then it was about organizing the peasantry. There was also the syndicalists that were like anarchist factory organizers and stuff. But nowadays, the anarchist movement tends to focus on movementism, right? They want to organize hipsters. They want to organize the counterculture. They don't eat, they dumpster dive. And, that was a whole thing. They don't buy food because that's like supporting the man, right? We just eat it out of garbage cans. We dumpster dive, right? You probably like go to stores and spend money. We don't believe in money. We're like revolutionary anarchists, man. We don't believe in money. We only shoplift. Yeah, we only shoplift. And, I don't know. They talk about lifestyle anarchism where, the goal, it's no longer really about, achieving the goal. It's about living the most badass lifestyle. This is, Gen X kind of stuff. A little bit different than what I'm talking about. Thank you, James DeTerry, for your super chat. Always appreciated. Always appreciated. All right. How did the May 4th movement change China? The May 4th movement, after World War I, there was the Treaty of Versailles. And the Treaty of Versailles, it divided up, it basically, all the maps were redrawn by, the war. And it was the terms of the war ending, right? And, they redrew some, France got some territories. And one of the parts of the Versailles Treaty was that the parts of China that had been seized by Germany were given to Japan, not given back to China, right? That China, instead of, getting its territory back after the Germans had been defeated, their territory was handed over to the Japanese imperialists. And Woodrow Wilson was largely the person who was responsible for that decision. Woodrow Wilson kind of dictated the terms of the Versailles Treaty, his famous 21 points, League of Nations, right? And they handed over China's territory, not back to China, but to other imperialists. And that was a huge source of outrage in China, just a huge source of outrage. And so all over China, people began boycotting Japanese goods and burning down stores that sold Japanese products. And they actually found, I believe, a mob of students, thousands of students went to the building where they had, where they had signed the treaty, and they went up and they got the desk, the very desk on which the treaty had been signed, and they lit it on fire. And they burned Woodrow Wilson in effigy. They had effigies of Woodrow Wilson that they lit on fire, and they were down with Woodrow Wilson, and it was a moment where China had faced this national humiliation, this massive humiliation as a country, to have their territory handed over to other imperialists rather than given back to them at the end of the war. But there was an upsurge of nationalistic and anti-imperialist feeling in China. And the KMT movement, led by Dr. Sun Yat-sen, was a big part of it. And Mao Zedong, was not yet a communist. He was a Kropotkinist anarchist. But he led a group called the New People's Study Group. And the New People's Study Group, they went out and they enforced a boycott of Japanese goods. And they would, form a line outside of stores that sold Japanese products. And if you went in, they might beat you up. Right, and that was the May 4th movement. The May 4th movement was very much the May 4th movement was very much the beginnings of many great things to come. I mean, it was a reemergence. It was a national mobilization of the population against a humiliation of the country and against the imperialists. I think it did have a big impact on China historically. I mean, it was, and Mao, as an individual, as a political leader, Mao's formative moment was the May 4th movement. Mao was a leader of the May 4th movement, and his activist, his group was a big part of it. I mean, it really gave birth to Mao, made Mao somebody special in China, so there you go. Would the emergence of Roosevelt-style progressive Bonapartism in the USA be a positive or negative? All right, emergence of progressive Bonapartism, positive or negative? All right. So there you go. All right. Next question. Someone says, are the current Iran protests a color revolution? I wasn't aware that there were protests going on in Iran. I haven't seen that in the news. So I don't know, right? What I will say is that there are disagreements in Iran. There are different political factions within the government. There's principalists and reformists. There's disagreements, and I don't know what's currently going on in Iran. I haven't seen the news out of Iran lately. I did look at some news, but I didn't see anything about this. But whatever differences exist in Iran, the imperialists will try to manipulate them for their own ends. You can be sure of that. You can be sure of that. So I don't know what people are protesting about in Iran right now. It may be that, that this is a disagreement within the Islamic Republic, but you can be sure no matter what happens, the imperialists will try to manipulate it in some way. Don't doubt it. Don't doubt it. All right. Is anarchism an infantile disorder? Well, look, you're referring to left-wing communism and infantile disorder, which is a book published by Lenin, Left-Wing Communism and Infantile Disorder. And the reason Lenin used the word infantile to describe, the left-wing communists was that they were doing things that weakened them in the name of trying to appear more revolutionary, right? For example, elections, right? In normal times in a capitalist society, elections are one of the only times a lot of people think about politics. There's a lot of average people who rarely think about politics, except when it's time to go to vote. When it's time to go to vote, they think about politics. So if communists boycott the elections and announce voting isn't the answer, only revolution is, all the people who would see them on the ballot will never hear from them. All the people who would be informed about communism by hearing about a communist candidate who's running for office and hearing what they have to say will never hear about them. If communists just childishly say, I'm so revolutionary, I'm not going to run candidates, they're not really helping themselves. They're not. I mean, they're not really helping themselves at all. What they're doing is they're isolating themselves from the broad masses of people. That's what's going on. They will just, make themselves weaker and weaker and weaker. Same with labor unions, right? If there's a mass labor movement and communists announce, oh no, it's not led by communists, we're not going to support, labor unions that aren't 100% communist, well, then they isolate themselves, right? And the infantile part that Lenin is describing is that in the name of making oneself feel like they are very revolutionary, they cut themselves off from the masses. And in many ways, modern anarchism can be a little bit infantile. I would argue, however, that most anarchists nowadays, most people walking around calling themselves anarchists, are not anarchists. They are some kind of weird social democrats or something else, right? Anarchism is the ultra-left, deviation in the anti-capitalist movement. Social democracy is the right-wing, pro-imperialist, reformist deviation. And that most of the people on the internet who claim they're anarchists or libertarian socialists or whatever, most of them call for voting for Democrats. Most of them don't advocate dismantling the capitalist system and the rule of profits. I mean, they're not really ultra-leftists, right? Ultra-leftists who won't vote because they're so revolutionary. Ultra-leftists who won't work in any labor union that's not run by communists. That's not who these people are. A lot of these people that are like, I'm a libertarian socialist, what they are is they're some kind of social democrat. They vote for Democrats. They support the Democratic Party. They support imperialism and its attacks on anti-imperialist states. They want to they don't even really want to dismantle the capitalist system. They just want, worker co-ops. That's not ultra leftism. That's not, left-wing communism and infantile disorder. What that is some kind of weird form of social democracy. That's kind of some weird social democratic deviation, that uses sometimes anarchist dressing, but is not even really anarchism. So there you go. Does the U.S. labor aristocracy exist? Of course. No. The thing is, right, and this is where it gets tricky. A lot of American leftists don't acknowledge labor aristocracy. They say it's not real. They say, they don't know what it means. And thank you for the super chat marching orders, right? What is labor aristocracy? Labor aristocracy is a concept Lenin developed, and people say it's not the same as labor bureaucracy, right? Labor union bosses who make lots of money, that's the labor bureaucracy. But the labor aristocracy, or the aristocracy of labor, is a different concept. The idea is that there are some working class people, average working class people, who benefit from imperialism. And because they benefit from imperialism, it makes them less class conscious and less revolutionary. And are there working class people in the United States who benefit from imperialism and as a result are less class conscious and less anti-imperialist? You betcha. There is lots of labor aristocracy in the United States. Absolutely. The first manifestation of it in U.S. history is when you had the skilled trades and the unskilled trades, when there were some labor unions in the American Federation of Labor that refused to join labor unions and refused to organize workers they considered to be unskilled, right? If you were just an assembly line worker, they considered you, oh, no, we're skilled. The construction workers unions were labor aristocrats, and they tended to be quite conservative and right-wing. They tended to ban black people from their unions. They tended to ban non-English speakers. In some cases, they even banned Roman Catholics from their unions. And they were working class people, but they were seeing their living standards go up because of imperialism. And thank you, Eduardo. Their living standards were going up because of imperialism. And as a result, they were loyal to the imperialists and hostile to other working class people at home and hostile to communist revolutionary movements around the world and more reformist, right? And that's the problem of labor aristocracy. And yes, that still exists. Look, go to the suburbs. The suburbs are full of people who are working class, right? Maybe they, construction workers, auto workers, steel workers, were working class folks, but, they don't particularly care much for African Americans. They think Donald Trump was doing a great job. They think we need to bomb the Middle East and invade them. They think China is our big enemy. That's labor aristocracy. Now, and the problem is, so you get, a lot of leftists that won't talk about this. But then you get the other deviation, which is you get a lot of leftists who do talk about it. They talk about it, and they make it this thing that because labor aristocracy exists, because there are working class people in the United States who benefit from imperialism, and as a result, it affects their consciousness. Because of that, there's no hope. Oh, no, just give up. Let's just go home. No, there's no hope for revolution. The USA is a bought-off labor aristocrat country. Workers' Party, right? And no, labor aristocracy is a real phenomenon. But what's going on right now is that the labor aristocracy is being broken down systemically. Right now, the living standards, how'd you win over friend headed to white supremacy. Labor aristocracy is being systemically broken down. Living standards are declining. The wages, those jobs that were so good paying that made people labor aristocrats are being eliminated. Now is the time for solidarity. The labor aristocracy still exists, but it's being eroded. and eroded and eroded and eroded and eroded and eroded and eroded and eroded. I mean, it's being worn down. And now there's an opportunity for solidarity. Now is not the time to just declare, oh, there's no hope, labor aristocracy. You might have been able to say that in the 50s. You might have been able to say that in the 60s and 70s. But right now, living standards in the USA are decreasing. Now is the opportunity to win people to stand in solidarity with people around the world, to stand in solidarity with other workers, right? As Lenin, he says in, the essay where he talks the most about labor aristocracy, imperialism, imperialism and the split in socialism. He says it's our duty to go lower and deeper to the real masses, right? And that the labor aristocracy, they're only defending the temporary privileges of some workers, right? To go lower and deeper to the real masses, right? So now is not the time to just declare, oh, labor aristocracy, they benefit from imperialism, so no, right? Imperialism is entering a new stage of crisis right now. Look at what's happening in the United States, how living standards are dropping. People are now is not the time to just announce, oh, it's over. So there you go. Now is the time of great opportunities because of the decline of the labor aristocracy. It still exists, but it's in decline. Okay. What kind of urban planning should socialists advocate? Well, first of all, we got to oppose gentrification. That's one thing. I mean, the way the rent shoots up in working class neighborhoods, and working class people have to move out, so all the rich hipsters can come in there and party and have it be their fifth apartment. That's going on all over the world. Urban centers. We saw real estate speculation and the driving up of the driving up of real estate prices and rents, and working class people who've lived in this neighborhood for generations are driven out. That's got to be gotten rid of. We got to oppose real estate speculation. Houses are for living in. They're not for profits of capitalists, right? And the fact that the rents have gotten so astronomically insane in places like New York City, places like London, places like San Francisco, the reason that that's been allowed to happen is because there are loads of empty apartments. There's a lot of landlords, capitalist landlords, who build apartments and they don't ever intend for the people to actually live in it. They just wait for the market to go up, and then they flip the building and they make a profit. And that's got to be gotten rid of. And there are laws you could pass. That could make it go away. Tax the landlords for empty apartments, right? Make it so that every empty apartment in your building, if you're a landlord and there's an empty apartment, you have to pay an empty apartment tax. Do that, and the price of rent will shoot right down because those landlords will be desperate to get people in their apartments. That's one thing you could do. There's other things you could do that would end real estate speculation. It would end gentrification. Other things. Look, there was a proposal after World War II that I thought was kind of brilliant, was the idea you should paint the streets white, right? That if you painted the streets white, they would absorb the sunlight. It would be much more efficient. It's kind of genius, right? Of course, it wasn't taken. But why not paint the streets white, right? Think about what the streets would be like. Google this. It's got a fascinating proposal. It's a brilliant proposal. Paint the streets white. Just white paint all over the streets. And that would very much, improve things in urban settings. That's one thing you could do. Another thing in terms of urban planning, the way most cities are, in my experience, most cities in the United States, it's so bizarre. In most cities in the United States, you have the black side of town and the white side of town, right? And then right in the middle of the black side of town, you have the white university, right? That's surrounded by like radicals. And then on top of that, the white side of town isn't white anymore. In Cleveland, it was like this, right? So in Cleveland, you had the west side, which was the white side of Cleveland, but it's not white anymore, right? Not since the 70s, really. But it was historically the white side of town. So it's slightly more economically prosperous. Yet the black side of town, which was the east side of Cleveland, right? And then smack dab in the middle of the black side of town, you had Cleveland Heights, where Case Western Reserve University is, and there's a lot of college professors and hippies and whatever. And, it's like New York City, right? In New York City, you've got Lower Manhattan, the white part of Manhattan. You got Harlem, Washington Heights, Harlem. Those are, that's the black and Latino part of town. And in the middle of Harlem, you have Columbia University, which is, it's a big university, and there's a bunch of hippies who live there, and hippies and college professors live near Columbia University. That's a very weird way of running cities, I must say. It's a very bizarre way of running cities, right? I would think that in a socialist, society, first of all, the suburb versus urban thing would have to be broken down. I would think you would have to find a way that this idea that we have cities that are urban and then we have suburbs that are, well, that would have to be broken down, right? You'd have to get rid of that. And ultimately, the Communist Manifesto, one of the things that Marx lists as a goal of the communists is to get rid of the divide between city and countryside, break down the divide between city and countryside, right? In Nicaragua, one of the slogans the Sandinistas use is "Grow where you are planted." Grow where you are planted, meaning they don't want urban, they don't want rural kids in Nicaragua to grow up and move to the cities. They think that that's not good for the country. Instead, what they want is they say they want there to be more economic opportunity in the countryside, right? They want there to be more economic opportunity, more hospitals, more jobs, more infrastructure, and that tends to lead to people being happier, right? That the phenomenon we see all over the developing world of people from the countryside moving to the cities, leaving their family behind and then getting involved in this urban lifestyle that involves drugs and depression and all kinds of stuff. But no, if you can grow where you are planted, it's one of the beautiful things the Sandinistas have done. This slogan, "Grow where you are planted." I'm from Ohio. I'm from a small town in Ohio. Wouldn't it have been great if I didn't have to move to New York City in order to support myself? Wouldn't it be great if so many people I went to school with, didn't have to move to California or the East Coast to survive? But imagine if we could grow where we're planted. Imagine if there was a thriving economy in Ohio, a thriving economy in Michigan, a thriving economy in Illinois and Nebraska and Kansas, right? That's the goal, but that's not the goal of the imperialists. The imperialists see the United States as Southern California and New York City as just a hub in a global financial system that connects big cities all over the world, driving living standards down. And that needs to be gotten rid of. We need to grow where you are planted, raising living standards all across the country. That's how a socialist government would operate. What do I think of Erdogan? Erdogan is a bourgeois nationalist, right? He's more independent. He's not a puppet of the United States. He's a little more independent. He's not a socialist. Definitely not a socialist. Definitely not an anti-imperialist. He collaborates with the imperialists. He represents a lot of wealthy capitalists in Turkey. And sometimes the U.S. imperialists make him a better deal. Other times, Russia and China and the anti-imperialist countries make him a better deal. And he does what he thinks is best for him at the time. And that's generally how Erdogan operates. Erdogan's a lot like Modi in India. He's a lot like Duterte in the Philippines. These are not socialists. These are not revolutionaries. These are not anti-imperialists. They're just, and there's going to be more of them, right? And it's really the rise of Russia and China and anti-imperialism that enables them to emerge, right? Because now that there's an alternative bloc in the global economy, now, the USA, it's not all centered around the United States. So if you're if you're the billionaires and the capitalists of Turkey, and you're, getting ready to figure out what you do with the country, you don't just go to the USA and say, "What would you like, sir? How would you like your breakfast?" Instead, you can go to Russia and say, "All right, Russia, what are you offering? Okay, America, what are you offering? Okay, China, what are you offering?" And then you come back and you say, "All right, what are we going to do here?" There you go. I mean, Turkey has bought their missiles from Russia. They bought missiles from Russia. The USA is furious about that. How dare they do that? Well, Turkey is independent enough. They can say, "You know what, America, we may be a NATO country, but we want to buy missiles from Russia. We can do that," right? There you go, right? I mean, Erdogan is a more independent leader, but he's not a socialist, not an anti-imperialist. And one of his goals, I believe, is to he wants to recreate the Ottoman Empire. I mean, his aspiration is to create some kind of Ottoman Turkish Empire once again. So there you go. He's very religious. which is a big deal in Turkey because it's illegal under their constitution to have an Islamic state, but he's very much aligned with really fanatical religious forces. Zizek calls Trump, Erdogan, Modi, etc. the ethnocentrism plus neoliberalism. Do you agree? I don't know if, I mean, I don't know. I honestly don't know, Chaya. I mean, they've all collaborated with neoliberalism to some degree or other, but, you know, Trump, Erdogan, Modi, I mean, they've all kind of pushed back also. I mean, it's weird. I mean, again, I would use the term bourgeois nationalist. That's what I would use. Bourgeois nationalism, you know, the new right, bourgeois nationalism. I mean, this is what we've seen. This is not revolutionary anti-imperialism by any means. It's not socialism, but it's not standard global neoliberalism. This is right-wing bourgeois nationalism, right? It's kind of the independents, certain capitalists of the world saying, we're going to do our own thing, and we're not going to follow the global agenda of the ultra-rich, but we're also not going to be socialist and anti-imperialist. It's a move to the right. It's right-wing bourgeois nationalism. That's what I would call it. All right. The Proud Boys say they're anti-Wall Street and anti-socialism. How does that work? Well, I mean, it's disappointing, the Proud Boys are this. I mean, first of all, right? I think the Proud Boys are some kind of weird psychological experiment. They're some kind of weird psychological experiment. Forgive me for being crass, okay? Forgive me for being crass. I'm just going to straight up and say it. It's on their Wikipedia page. If there's, children watching, cover your ears. If there's people that don't want to hear gross things, cover your ears. I'm just going to say it, okay? I'm just going to say it. I'm just going to say it. I am just going to say it, all right? So if you're offended by this gross topic of conversation that I'm about to mention, I apologize preemptively. But one of the main beliefs of the Proud Boys is that you shouldn't masturbate, okay? This is an entire organization centered around the idea of, quote-unquote, no fap, not masturbating. Okay? That is the weirdest thing ever. Okay? People's personal habits, they do what they want, they don't do your religion, whatever, okay? But the fact that someone forms an entire organization with that as a central belief is one of the weirdest things I have ever heard in my life. It is weird, okay? But then, I'm sorry, as someone who has read a bunch of this synthetic left crap about what fascism is, right? Where, they think fascism is sexual frustration, fascism is the desire to be controlled. It sounds to me like somebody actually opened like Wilhelm Reich and Theodor Adorno and Hannah Arendt, and they're like, how do we build a fascist organization? Well, according to all these people, fascism is about people resenting the fact that they can't masturbate and people having sexual control. So we'll build up sexual frustration in these guys, and it's wacky. Okay? It sounds almost like one of these people read some of this weird new left stuff about what a fascist group is. Based on that, tried to build a fascist group. That's what it looks like to me. Seriously. It looks to me like, without a scientific understanding of fascism, somebody sat down and they said, how do I make a fascist group? I know, we'll get a bunch of young white men together, tell them not to masturbate, tell them Western civilization is under attack, tell them the commies are threatening Western civilization, and tell them to never jerk it. And, it's the weirdest thing, okay? And I apologize for the crassness of this. I usually try to keep it very, very clean here. But it's weird. And I have met Gavin McInnes. I actually met him at some very strange conversation. I'm sure he doesn't remember me. It was like a back and forth. I was in the same place he was. I was there as a journalist. I'm not going to say where it was, but I did, in fact, meet Gavin McInnes one time. And he, whatever. He struck me as a little bit of an odd dude. I'll just tell you that much. A little bit of an odd dude. Not the kind of person I would ever want to just, spend time with. It kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Let me just put it that way. But Proud Boys have always perplexed me, right? It's the weirdest thing. But, at the end of the day, right? So why does this strange group of kind of racist, white supremacist, pro-Trump guys who don't masturbate, why do they why do they say they're anti-Wall Street and anti-socialism? Well, there's a couple layers to this. First of all, first things first, a lot of libertarians, don't understand. They have this delusion. They say, that's not real capitalism. If you talk to them, if you say the USA is a capitalist country, they say, no, it's not. In their minds, it's not capitalism unless it's like this heaven on earth, Shangri-La utopia in which the government isn't involved and everyone can just do whatever they want and somehow it works and self-interest leads to, they have this like Ayn Rand true capitalism fantasy, right? And so, based on that, they'll notice that a lot of big corporations, a lot of big banks, and all of that are involved in writing the regulations of the government, right? That's true. A lot of big banks, they're definitely they look. Obamacare was practically written by the big healthcare companies, right? So yes, is big healthcare companies involved in the regulation of healthcare? Sure. So based on that, they say, oh, all the big corporations, Wall Street, they're all socialists because they're involved in the government doing stuff. Because whenever the government does anything, it's socialism. And capitalism, according to them, is only this pure, libertarian paradise, right? So in their weird mind, their weird mind, right? Somehow, because government is involved, corporations are heavily involved in writing regulations. And true capitalism is, is this, fantasy that's only existed in their head. Therefore, all the big corporations are socialist because they want the government to do stuff. So that's one part of it. Another thing is that this is a game that far right groups have played for a long time, right? So get beyond the libertarian stuff. Get further back, right? The Nazis, they claimed that Marxism was a Jewish conspiracy against the German people, and they were against the communists, and they were against capitalism, right? And they were for German National Socialism because they were the international capitalists were oppressing the great German people, as were the international socialists and the Marxists, and they were for the German nation. This is a thing that right-wing nationalist elements have run for a long time. Marxism is all just a big conspiracy by the global capitalists. That's their line, right? This is a big theme. Right? And in Germany, right, the Nazis, right, they were representing Krupp. They started out kind of working as a counter gang for the British to fight the communists, but later they worked with Krupp and Tyson and Hollimer Schacht and German capitalists who were against American and British banks, but also against communism, right? There was that German industrial capitalist layer, the German industrial capitalists and the German finance houses. They were for Hitler because Hitler would kick the ass of the communists and exterminate the communists, and Hitler would reassert their economic hegemony and independence against the Americans and the British, right? And that's a long-standing fascist trope, right? You're against the biggest capitalists, but you're also against the working class and the proletariat, and that often fascist movements have a petty bourgeois or middle class character, right? Because fascist movements and right-wing movements tend to be fundamentally pessimistic, right? They think the world is going to hell. They think the world is going to hell. They're looking backward, right? And that is the only place for the petty bourgeoisie to look. The petty bourgeoisie, the middle class, can only look backward because the future inevitably represents them being destroyed. If capitalism is victorious, it leads to the centralization and monopolization of credit. So they're going to lose their little store, they're going to lose their little company, it's going to be absorbed into the big corporations. However, if the working class is victorious and socialism triumphs, why eventually, they're gonna be part of a planned economy under the rule of the people. The petty bourgeoisie seeks to preserve their atomized independence. They want to be independent, right? They don't want to be absorbed by big capital, and they don't want to be absorbed by the proletarian revolution. They are independent. They are the independent layer. And if you read George Orwell's 1984, if you read Anthem by Ayn Rand, they're really depressing books. George Orwell says, imagine the future, it's like a boot stomping on the human face, right? An Anthem by Ayn Rand, it's this dark book where there's no word for I, and the only word is we, right? There's no, and this is all petty bourgeois ideology, because the petty bourgeoisie, the middle class, is doomed. The middle class is doomed, historically, right? It's caught between two great camps, the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. And so they have a pessimistic worldview. So what do? The only way they can look is back. They want to bring back the good old days. They want to bring back the good old days. That's the middle class. Bring back the good old days, right? And that's fascism, right? Make Germany great again, make America great again. Bring back the Reich, bring back the glory of the past. There you go. That's the confusion, and that's why ultra right wing trends, not the mainstream right, not neocons, but like far right trends. Um, they will glorify, they will attack big capital and socialism in this mindset that they're for the middle class, which has no future, and they only look backward. All right, there you go. Okay, NATO bombing of Yugoslavia. Well, now we know. Now we know that the NATO bombing of Yugoslavia was based on lies. We know that, right? We know that. Thoughts on anarchism. My goodness, how many times am I going to answer this? Nima, go back. Go back to the beginning of the Q&A. I did like 2 long answers on anarchism. Go back, Nima. Go back. Go back. But anyway, NATO bombing of Yugoslavia, right? So, Yugoslavia, was, broken apart, right? You had it being broken up, ethnic separatist movements, etc. And then you had, the emergence of, Serbia, which was led by Slobodan Milosevic and the Socialist Party. And you had, among Albanians who had left Albania and moved to the Kosovo region of Serbia, you had the Kosovo Liberation Army, the KLA, which was an Islamic separatist group that was trying to break Kosovo away from the rest of Serbia. You had a civil war where the Serbian army was fighting the Kosovo Liberation Army, the KLA, which were Wahhabis, extremists. And there were atrocities probably committed in that war, no doubt. On both sides, the KLA were not nice people. They were murderers, and they kidnapped people and cut their heads off. And Kosovo Liberation Army were not nice people, but the Serbian military also committed atrocities, and that kind of thing happened. But, there was this photograph that was taken that reminded everyone of the Holocaust, right? And it was this man standing behind a barbed wire fence. Well, we now learn that that fence was just there. He wasn't standing behind the barbed wire fence. It was just a fence that was there. And on top of that, the man wasn't starving. He actually had a disease. But there was this photograph of one man who looked really skinny and was standing by a barbed wire fence. And everyone saw that photo and they thought, oh my God, this is the Holocaust again, right? This is a guy starving and he's behind a barbed wire fence. Well, if you look at the details, there's a very good book, War, Lies, and Videotape, where Michael Parenti and others and Ramsey Clark, who I used to work with, I'm sorry, but look at the details of what happened in Serbia. Right? Were there atrocities committed? Yes. But was it a genocide? No. According to the UN, there was not genocide being committed in Serbia. There was not genocide. Milosevic was not guilty of genocide. Right? The UN has said this. Michael Parenti wrote a very good book, To Kill a Nation. Right? That now they've looked at the facts on the ground. And while there were war crimes, yes, there were war crimes committed by the Serbian military. Yes, there were war crimes committed by the Kosovo Liberation Army. But, genocide, were they trying to exterminate, ethnic Albanians? No, right? There was a civil war going on. But it was on the basis of these allegations of genocide that the bombing was conducted. Right? The bombing of Yugoslavia was conducted based on a lie. And if you look at the details, right, about what has come out since the bombing of Yugoslavia, there was lies. There was just a lot of lies that were told in order to justify it, right? And there was demonization of Serbs, right? Ethnic Serbs were demonized. And there was this whole effort to play up the idea that Serbs were the most evil people in the world and that they were brutal, vicious murderers and they were committing genocide. And that's not what happened, right? It's not what happened. There were war crimes. There were people that were harmed, but it wasn't a genocide, according to the UN. So there you go. All right. What bread tube did I watch for the research? Oh my gosh. I never want to watch. I watched all kinds of Vosh and all kinds of Thought Slime and all kinds of, ContraPoints and all kinds of, I don't ever want to watch any of that again. I'm sorry. Do you want me to like list off every video I watched? Because I can't do that for you. I watched way more bread tube than I ever wanted to watch. So there you go. I watched me some bread tube. Yes, sir, I did. All right. David Fox points out that Australia has had Medicare for all since 1983. Wow. Medicare for all since 1983. Yeah, and I mean, and that means that ever since then, all the people of Australia have been dying on the way to the hospital, dying in waiting rooms, and all. I mean, it's so ridiculous. I was told when I was a kid that in Britain people die all the time because of national health care. That's not true. I was told when I was a kid that in Canada people can't get the surgery they need and die. That's not true. No, we were all told all these horror stories about national health care, that it was, oh my God, if you have Medicare for all, if you have national health care, the government runs health care, and it's starvation and death, and all these people go to the hospital when they don't need to because it's free, and as a result, you can never see a doctor when you really need one, and blah 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 blah. It's all malarkey. I'm sorry. Go to Britain. I mean, and people believe this. People still believe this. There's a lot of right wingers who still believe this. A lot of Americans really do believe that if we were to have Medicare for all, everyone would die, and the USA would turn into some kind of like third world authoritarian regime where people are like not able to get the medicine they need. This is what they've told people, right? That that national health care is communism, and communism leads to everyone being starving and miserable and dying. And I mean, it's really sad. It's really, really sad. But like anyone who's been to Australia will tell me they're doing just fine. I mean, and Canada doing just fine, right? The United Kingdom doing just fine. France, Germany doing just fine. I mean, most of the world provides healthcare to the population. Now, Medicare for all is single payer insurance. It's not nationalizing all the hospitals. It's not like what Britain has. But, I mean, it's just pretty unbelievable. Pretty unbelievable that we've been sold this bill of goods and that people still buy into it. Still, right? How does proletarian patriotism appeal to black people? Okay, first of all, right? Let me repeat myself, right? Nationalism is love for one's nation. National chauvinism is the belief that one's nation is better than others. The United States is not a nation, as never has been a nation, right? The United States, there's not a national language, there's not a national culture, there's not national territory. I mean, the United States is not a nation state. This isn't Britain. I'm sorry, Britain's not a nation state either, but it's not France, it's not Germany, it's not Ireland, right? There's no American nation. Black people in the United States consider themselves largely to be a nation, right? And there is a black national culture. There is a black national dialect. There's territory of the United States that is historically black. And so nationalism for black people makes sense, right? And I support black nationalism, right? I've got many good friends in the Nation of Islam, and I've been quoted many times in Final Call newspaper, and the black people of the United States, a colonized people who are super exploited within the United States, they have the right to fight for their independence as a nation. They have the right to choose separation or integration for themselves. However, none of that has anything to do with patriotism. Patriotism is nothing but love for the country in which you live. I don't know anybody who wants their neighborhood and their country to be torn apart by civil war. I don't know anybody who wants things in their community, in their neighborhood, to become less economically prosperous. I don't know anybody who says, you know what, I really hope that in my community, in my city, in my country, a bunch of people die. No one thinks that, right? Patriotism is simply love for the land on which you live and a desire for things for the people in that area to improve. Right? That's all it is, right? And I'm not asking anybody to, salute the flag, especially no one who, if you are a black nationalist and you maintain that you don't want to be part of, of the United States, and you reject, the American flag and stuff, that's absolutely your right. And I would never try to force that on you. I would never, but at the same time, right? I mean, if you want things in the place in which you live to get better, you're patriotic, right? If you want things to get better in the place in which you live, You are patriotic. That's all patriotism is. Patriotism is affection for the land in which you live. It's not nationalism. And it's definitely not national chauvinism, right? It is a desire for the place in which you live to have things get better. And Mao Zedong in the Little Red Book, he says there is no contradiction between patriotism and internationalism, right? To truly love the United States means you want to dismantle imperialism. And you want the USA to have a better relationship with the world and not have an economic system centered around the exploitation of developing countries. If you truly love the United States, you would want it to move towards socialism and have a relationship of win-win cooperation with countries around the world. If you truly love the United States, you would want to get rid of the military-industrial complex, get rid of the prison-industrial complex. You'd want it to be a country free of poverty, free of police brutality, free of war. And I mean, if you truly love the United States, if you're truly a patriot, you have to be an internationalist. If you're truly a patriot, you must be an internationalist. And to be truly an internationalist, you have to be a patriot. Because if you truly love the world and want to build a global community, your country is part of that global community, right? You can't say, I want the workers of the world to be prosperous, but I want the workers in my country to eat shit. Doesn't work that way. If you want the whole world working class to advance, that includes the workers of your homeland. There is no contradiction between patriotism and internationalism. There you go. All right. Finally, Rotched Reds. Would mind you discussing it once again. Important events between events happening in the film. What do you think actually happened? Okay. All right. Reds, historical inaccuracies. All right. Reds, historical inaccuracies. All right. Very good. Wrote it down. All righty. All righty. Why did Stalin kill Trotsky? Because Trotsky was convicted of trying to overthrow the Soviet government. He was tried in absentia and found guilty. There's meetings where Stalin says we have to kill Trotsky. Yeah, and that was they killed him. They felt he was hurting the Soviet Union internationally. They felt he was part of a conspiracy along with German and Japanese forces to destabilize the Soviet Union as the Second World War was beginning, and then they killed Trotsky. He was found guilty in absentia. They believed he was part of a mass conspiracy and executed him on that basis. Was he part of this mass conspiracy? Don't ask me that. I have no way of knowing. I've read what's out there. I've read Grover Furr, and I've read other writers on it, and I don't know enough. I've read what they say, and I don't know enough about it. You know what I mean? And it doesn't. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter at the end of the day. I'm not Stalin, right? I'm not Stalin, and at the end of the day, right? At the end of the day, Trotsky was a counter-revolutionary. He was hurting the Soviet Union. His theory of permanent revolution is a destructive idea. He was not an anti-imperialist. He was a collaborator with the imperialists. And I think negative things about Trotsky, but did Trotsky deserve to die for that? No, obviously. But was Trotsky, actively harming the Soviet Union? Was he involved in some kind of conspiracy with the fascists? I don't know. I wasn't there. Did the Soviet Union feel it was necessary as an act of self-defense to kill Trotsky? Probably. Were they right about that? I don't know. I don't know if they were right. I don't know. I mean, if Trotsky, was actually doing all the stuff he was convicted of doing, where, he was organizing assassinations and stuff, I mean, that would be awful. But anti-imperialist national anthem. Anti-imperialist national anthem. But, I don't know if he was doing all of that or not, right? I just don't know. So, I mean, at the end of the day, not a Trotsky fan, but I mean, as far as the assassination, I don't know. I just don't know, right? I don't know. Me no like Trotsky, but as far as the death of Trotsky, I just don't know. All right. Exact moment I became a communist. I am gonna have to. This isn't. I always say if you ask me a super chat, I'm going to give you an answer. And I will give you an answer, but it won't be the answer you want to hear. And the answer that I'm going to give you, the exact moment I became a communist, the answer I'm going to give you is I'm not ready to share that story. There is a moment that comes to my mind, but I am not ready to share it. I'm not ready at this point. I will eventually probably tell that story, but now is not the time for that answer. So the answer is pass. The answer is pass. I'm not going to share that. I'm going to keep that private at the moment, but that story will eventually come out. I probably will find the right moment to share that story, but not anytime soon. I'm going to hold off on that for now. I'm going to keep that private. So there you go. All right. Pessimism, aestheticism, and glorification of suffering. Well, these are three different things, okay? Pessimism, right, is the idea that, it's like hopelessness. Things are getting worse, looking to the past, seeing the world is in decline, seeing the world is getting worse and worse and worse as it goes along. That's pessimism. And I argue that's a dangerous, dangerous thing. We should stay optimistic. We have a fundamentally optimistic ideology, number one. All right. Aestheticism, that's paying attention to, art, the way the music sounds, the way people dress, the kind of colors that are being used. It's paying attention not to the big ideas being communicated, but rather to the presentation, right? That's aestheticism. And aestheticism is very important. It's very, very, very important, right? And I think communists often, we don't pay enough attention to that, right? I used to go to so many communist meetings that it was somebody reading a speech from a piece of paper and feeling like they were so important reading this document. And it's just like, give me a break. Now, whenever I organize a communist meeting, I will try my hardest to make sure there's music there, for Christ's sakes. Um, uh, um, all right, police forces post-revolution. All right. I've got an early interview tomorrow, folks. I'm interviewing Harpal Brar tomorrow morning, for goodness sakes, but police forces post-revolution. I'll keep answering your questions. There you go. That's all right. And I'll be back on tomorrow night. So, all right. So there you go. And then glorification of suffering. Well, look, I think that people should be willing to suffer for what they believe in. I think that people should be, exuding great sacrifice for a cause you believe in is a good thing. Suffering just for suffering's sake is not a good thing. Masochism, like, oh, I'm going to torture myself and be like, look at me, I just tortured myself. That's not good. But, the idea that one would make great sacrifices for a cause they believe in is something that's good. So, I mean, is that glorification of suffering? I don't know. Next question. All right. How do we solve the U.S. media problem? We're doing it right now. We're making our own media. We're making our own media. That's how we solve the U.S. media problem. We're making our own media. We're making our own content. We're challenging their lies. We're holding them accountable. So there you go. Next question. How is democratic socialism versus actually existing socialism, and how do you become a John Brown volunteer? Well, the democratic socialism of Bernie Sanders and others is basically just the idea, it's capitalism. It's the idea, capitalism with a welfare state. Capitalism, and everyone gets free healthcare and everyone gets free college. Actually, existing socialism was societies where the banks, factories, and industries and the major centers of economic power functioned according to a state central plan on the basis of what was good for society, not for profit. It's the elimination of the anarchy of production. It's the means of production being organized to serve public good and not profits. Eliminating profits in command, and having a planned economy, where profits no longer rule. So it's two different things. Bernie Sanders' democratic socialism is welfare state, capitalism with a welfare state. Actually, existing socialism is countries where profits are not in command and the economy is rationally organized. Big difference. If you want to become a John Brown volunteer, shoot me an email, calebmaupin@gmail.com. Send me an email. We need more John Brown volunteers. If you would like to be a John Brown volunteer to help out the Center for Political Innovation, or if you would like to send a donation to help the John Brown volunteers, because it's a little bit difficult. I mean, they're doing good work out there, but it's difficult, to maintain them. If you would like to send a donation to help the John Brown volunteers, send it to my PayPal, at calebmaupin@gmail.com. Just all one word, calebmaupin@gmail.com. I'm on PayPal, and, you can email me if you want to get involved in the John Brown volunteers, and there's going to be more social media about them very, very soon. Very, very soon. Russia and China, part of Global South. So yeah, if you want to get involved in that, the John Brown Volunteers would love to have your help. So send me an email and I'll connect you with them. I am not a John Brown volunteer, mind you, right? That's an important distinction to make, right? That I am a member of the Center for Political Innovation. I'm the founder of it. But the John Brown Volunteers are an independent body of people that are doing outreach to promote the Center for Political Innovation. They're a full-time outreach team. And, I have a job. I'm not a full-time outreach guy, but I support them. They're great folks. Russia, China, Global South. All right. Very good. All right. So, yeah, very good. All righty. Okay. MK Stalin. Well, it's very common in India and in many countries in the developing world to name your child after a prominent world leader and to give them the first name of the last name. You know what I mean? The president of Ecuador for a while was Lenin Moreno. Goodness gracious. After many years of bloodshed and destruction in Afghanistan and Iraq, the U.S. is shamelessly withdrawing. What did they accomplish and what end game in that? What is the end game? All right, I'll tell you. End game in Afghanistan. Right. Goal of Afghanistan. All right. All right. All right. I'm going to start giving y'all quick answers. But yes, it's very common. There's people whose first name is Lenin. There's women whose name is Lenina. There's people whose first name is Stalin. There's people whose first name is Stalina. Heard a hilarious story. There was an old man I knew who was a big admirer of Stalin, this old communist in New York City. Don't want to say his name. Older communist guy in New York City, huge Stalin fan. And his kid did karate. His kid played karate. And it was and the karate school, there was a kid from India. And the kid's name was Stalin. And they were having a karate tournament. They were watching this karate tournament. And the kid named Stalin. I mean, his name was Stalin because his father's name had been Stalin, and it was just a family name. It's just a name, right? In India, it's just a name. Stalin is just a name, right? But anyway, this kid named Stalin was doing a karate fight with another kid, and he started doing really, really well. And so everyone in the room started chanting, "Go Stalin! Go Stalin! Get him, Stalin! Get him, Stalin!" And the guy thought, this is weird. When I heard this story, I mean, you had to know this guy. This guy was like a huge Stalin fan, and he was sitting there in the karate studio watching this karate tournament where everyone in the room was chanting, "Go Stalin!" So there you go. There you go. All righty. Next question. Why does New Zealand has a high standard of living? It's a white settler country, right? White settlers went there, and they're considered part of the first world, right? They're a white European settler country, and they make super profits, and they have corporations, and it's like Australia, right? It's like Australia. I mean, it's like the United States, like Canada, right? That when white settlers go places and set up white settler regimes, often they don't become part of the third world, right? So there you go. There you go. Laos is definitely a socialist country. The Lao People's Republic, definitely a socialist country. Very small, and but it's definitely, they have their autonomy. The Lao people have their autonomy. They were originally with the Vietnamese, but then it was very clear they wanted their territorial autonomy, and they got it. Anti-imperialist state. Story of Spartacus. Spartacus was a Thracian slave, right? He was in ancient Rome, and he was a slave, and he was a nomad. And he was, he was part of a nomadic group that was fighting the Romans. This nomadic tribe that was, that was fighting the Romans. These tribes that had animals but traveled around, and they were fighting the Romans in Thrace, which is, it's a province in Italy. And there was this nomadic tribe that was fighting the Romans. He was taken captive and made a slave, which is what the Romans did when they fought people. They made people slaves. He was a good fighter. He was a very good fighter. So rather than just having him be a regular slave, they made him into a gladiator. And he was a gladiator, right? And the gladiators used to fight each other and he led a slave revolt. He broke free, and he led a whole bunch of slaves all across Italy in rising up against the Romans. And they controlled whole big areas of territory. And it was a big war in Rome against the slave uprising led by Spartacus. And Spartacus led this slave uprising all throughout Rome. all throughout Italy, I should say, all throughout Italy. There was whole areas of Italy that Spartacus and his military controlled, and it was slaves across Rome rising up. Um, Eventually Spartacus, and when the Roman army put down the Spartacus slave revolt, they crucified all of his followers along the road to Rome, right? All along the road to Rome. They crucified them. I'm sorry. Where is Thrace? I forgive me for not. Where is Thrace? Where is Thrace? I don't know. He was Thracian. He was from Thrace. I don't know where Greece. It's Greece. I apologize. My Greek friends, I do apologize. I'm sorry. I knew he was from Thrace. Didn't know where Thrace was. I'm sorry. I didn't know where Thrace was. I apologize. Thrace is in Greece. He was from Thrace. He was from Thrace. Oh, now it's in Bulgaria. I'm not very good at my ancient geography. Anyway, he was from Thrace, was a gladiator, led a slave revolt. Slave revolt failed. The slave revolt was really intense all across Italy. He seized a bunch of territory, and it was a big revolt. And after they put it down, they crucified him and all of his soldiers along the road back to Rome. The whole road, along all the side of the road, the whole way, they were crucified bodies of slaves. And the person who put down the revolt was General Marcus Crassus. General Marcus Crassus is the one who put down the revolt. And the movie Spartacus is completely historically inaccurate. The movie Spartacus basically has the Roman Republic falling and Crassus becoming like the fascist dictator to crush the slave revolt. That didn't happen. It was the Roman Republic that put down the slave revolt. Right? The Roman Republic survived, and it wasn't until the assassination of Julius Caesar that the Roman Republic fell. So that's not accurate. Right? The Roman Republic stayed intact. But yes, Marcus Crassus was the general who put down the slave revolt. Spartacus was a gladiator. Spartacus was a nomad from Thrace who was fighting the Romans and was taken into slavery. He wasn't born into slavery as they claim in movies and such. He was a gladiator slave who broke free and led a revolt. Did CPUSA member Dalton Trumbo help write the film Spartacus? Yes. But the book was originally written, the book Spartacus. It was based on the book Spartacus that was written by CPUSA member Howard Fast. So when Howard Fast wrote the Marxist novel Spartacus, where he uses Spartacus it's basically World War II. The movie Spartacus, the movie Spartacus and the novel by Howard Fast, not really about ancient Rome. It's about World War II, right? The idea is that Spartacus is leading this slave revolt, and it causes the Roman Republic to become fascist, right? And so then the way Spartacus's son is able to get free is because there's an alliance between the anti-fascist Romans and Spartacus's family. At the end of the movie, I'm ruining the movie for you, but it has nothing to do with what happened. It's about World War II, right? It's like the Soviet Union came into existence. That caused the capitalist world to become fascist. But then, because some capitalists didn't like fascism, there was some kind of alliance then against, that was able to win some victories for the workers. That's kind of the message of the movie, right? And it's a Marxist analogy, right? It's that, the slave revolt. And at one point, in the movie, they show the area that the slaves have liberated, and it's like communism. They're sharing all things in common, etc. Everyone has what they need and none are without. And it's the slave revolt is the Soviet Union. Rome is the Western capitalist world, and they have a republic, a democracy, or whatever. But then in the movie, Marcus Crassus becomes the dictator and crushes democracy, so that, that's not what happened, okay? The Roman Republic lasted long after the slave revolt of Spartacus. The slave revolt of Spartacus took place in 73 BC. The Roman Republic didn't fall until like the 40s, I think, was it 43 BC or something like that? So, yeah, that's not what happened, but it's a good movie. But the movie Spartacus is a little bit different than what actually happened. He really was a gladiator. He was from Thrace, which, he was from Thrace. He was a nomad, and, that's that. Okay. What is interesting is apparently, the Roman military was significantly challenged by this slave revolt. This is one thing I've heard, that they actually did, like, it's like, you talk about trench warfare nowadays with, like, like during World War One, we had a trench. They didn't have trenches, but they had lines. There was like a line of Roman soldiers across Italy that was constantly moving up and down. Like there was an entire line, right? And that it was quite, the Romans were forced to develop quite sophisticated military operations to defeat the slaves. They didn't, and so that there was like a line across Italy, like where they had this like big lines of soldiers that stretched all the way across, to block the slave revolt and to push. They would move the line forward, move it back. This was all big. I mean, this is like common sense in modern warfare, but it was a big deal back in those days. All right. Would the emergence of progressive Bonapartism be positive or negative? Very positive. When Roosevelt told workers they had a right to sit down and occupy their factories in the sit-down strike wave, very positive, right? Imagine if Joe Biden told workers in this country, you know what, you have the right to form a union, and I mean, imagine if Joe Biden called millions of Americans out into the streets to march for health care. Imagine that. If Joe Biden was president of the United States and he got on TV right now, the president of the United States, and said, I call on the American people to march for Medicare for all. Imagine if he did that. The country would shake. There'd be thousands and thousands of people in the streets the next day, and there'd be a whole bunch of people in Congress who suddenly would support Medicare for all. Yeah, if Biden were to actually start acting like a Bonapartist, that would be great. But he won't. He won't, because he's not Roosevelt, because Biden is not representing resistance to the ruling class. I mean, but yes, to have a progressive Bonapartist would be great. It would push people in the direction of getting politically active. It would give people it would give all kinds of people permission, to get politically active and mobilize. It would be a great thing, right? It would be a great thing. It would be a great thing if there was some kind of left-wing Bonapartism, because it would awaken people, and it would push people into motion. That's what Bonapartists tend to do, is they tend to mobilize the public in support of them. And if there was some kind of progressive Bonapartism in the United States, that would be a good development. George Galloway and the Workers' Party. I like what they do. I mean, I'm sure I don't agree with everything they've ever said or anything, but they have a good platform. Class struggle, fight for the people, anti-war. I love George Galloway. He's a great person. I mean, it's always an honor to be able to go on his program. I've met him before. He's a great man. I admire George Galloway. I first met George Galloway years ago when I lived in Cleveland, and he spoke at the Arab American Society of Cleveland. He spoke to this audience, and he brought the house down. It was like every Arab American activist in like the whole Midwest piled into Cleveland to this Middle Eastern restaurant that, to hear George Galloway speak, and standing ovation after standing ovation after standing ovation. I mean, it was an amazing evening, and he was speaking about Palestine. And it was amazing. I never thought in a million years that I'd be working with George Galloway, that I'd be going on his program, I'd be hanging out with him. And I mean, I'm just a huge admirer of George Galloway in so many ways. All right. How do you win over a friend headed toward white supremacy? Here's what you do. You get them away. You show them the real left. You show them William Z. Foster and Gus Hall, and you show them the real left. The reason a lot of people are attracted to white supremacy is because the left sucks, right? That's why, look, the Proud Boys, their rally they had here in New York City, it was like, lockdowns are communism. How are lockdowns communism? Well, but it's like, if people think lockdowns are communism, they would hate communism, because people hate lockdowns, right? I mean, and a lot of people are really put off by the shrill identity politics. You're racist. You're sexist. You're transphobic. Oh my God, you violated a rule. I got an A+ in my gender studies paper about you. I am a good little social justice warrior. It just, no one likes the left. The tone of the left sucks, okay? It sucks. The left, I mean, seriously. I mean, it's just vile, okay? So, the fake left are the best friend actual white supremacists have ever had, okay? This group of people that are like, oh, it's this whining, everyone's a racist, everyone's a sexist, everyone's transphobic. Oh, check your privilege. Everyone hates that, okay? And there's a lot of white people who they think that's what a communist is. And so of course they go the other way, right? Well, we have to show them that no, there's William Z. Foster and Gus Hall and Huey Newton and the Black Panthers. There's real leftism out there. There's real leftism out there. There is, strong working class political power. There's, right and wrong. There's real values. There's real anti imperialism. There's real historical progress. There is truth in the world that, the synthetic left is not the only left. If you want to win your friend away from synthetic leftism, show him, or if you want to win your friend away from white supremacy, show him real leftism, not the disgusting, pathetic, awful synthetic left that is the best friend neo-Nazis ever had. If I was a neo-Nazi, I would pay the synthetic left because they're the best friends, the best friends, the best friends. So there you go. Okie dokie. So there's that. Reds. Well, look, it's getting late. But if you read The Roots of American Communism by Theodore Draper, they tell you a lot about John Reed. John Reed and how, what it was like when he was in the USSR. John Reed didn't drink alcohol, for example. And the Bolsheviks, when they would go, when with Zinoviev or whatever, when they would go from, city to city on that train at the end of the movie, they would stop in every city and have sex with all the prostitutes and have drunken parties. John Reed was this, puritanical wasp from New England, and he didn't drink, and he was just kind of like, whoa, like he didn't like that, right? The movie, they don't show it. They show it, the end of the movie, the whole thing about the speech calling for jihad, that never happened, okay? But that was very much a statement about the Islamic Revolution of Iran. It was an attack on the left for supporting the Islamic Revolution of Iran. A lot of the ways that, Louise Brandt and John Reed are portrayed is a lot more about 60s counterculture than it is about the 1920s. That movie, Reds, is important because it's like the American liberal mind trying to process communists. The message you get from that movie is kind of that, communists, they have good intentions, they care about good issues, but, they're working for these scary foreign governments, and they're a little bit too idealistic and fanatical about their cause. It's oddly sympathetic to communists for a Hollywood movie, but it's still anti-communist. I would argue it's an anti-communist movie. When they have Emma Goldman give her rant, right? And at the end she says, it's a system that just doesn't work, John. Emma Goldman was an anarchist, okay? Right? But it's a system that just doesn't work, John. That's communism doesn't work. That's the American cliche. It has nothing to do with what Emma Goldman actually said. It's just a an anti-communist cliche they had to throw out there. And you'll notice that then in that scene, John Reed replies to her and says, well, actually, people are starving because of the blockade. He gives a real answer, but he gives it in this kind of automaton voice where you're supposed to think, oh, John Reed is brainwashed. Oh, he's just been brainwashed by the Stalinists. He doesn't get it. And again, that scene typed out, it's actually pretty good, right? Because John Reed gives a real answer about why people are starving in Russia. And Emma Goldman, I don't know. But it's, there's a couple other things. The fight that John Reed has towards the end of the movie with the Comintern, right? When John Reed is fighting with the Communist International and he's saying the American Federation of Labor does not represent the American worker, well, Lenin was right? That you can't just isolate yourself in the IWW, this revolutionary union. You have to go in to the mainstream unions. And Lenin was telling the American communists to join the American Federation of Labor and fight for revolutionary politics within that. That's not authoritarianism. That's the correct line. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's interesting, but it's a good movie. I've watched it many times, and I'll tell you, Reds, is a pretty good movie, honestly. I mean, I interpret it as subtly anti-communist, subtly, not full on, but subtly anti-communist. But it's a movie about American communists, which there's not many of. And it's somewhat sympathetic. It doesn't portray them as bad people. So there you go. Came out in like 1980, and it's the American mind trying to process the 1960s, trying to process the rise of communist groups and the new communist movement of the 70s. Who are these people? What is this about? And it's somewhat sympathetic. So there you go. Favorite anti-imperialist anthems? Well, the East German anthem is really, really beautiful, and I can sing the Soviet national anthem, and the March of the Volunteers, the Chinese anthem. They're all great. They're all great. All good stuff. All right, police forces in a revolution. Well, obviously, this is, Lenin. You have to change the nature of the state. The nature of the state has to change. You're going to need new security services, new policing agencies, right? There would have to be, a new military, a new intelligence apparatus, right? That this is Lenin, right? The state under capitalism serves capitalism. So as you're moving towards socialism, um, as you're moving towards socialism, you have to change the nature of the state, and you have to create a new state to serve workers' power, right? That's true, right? All right, Russia and China, they part of the global south. I don't like the term global south, honestly, because Russia is pretty far up north, right? Is North Korea part of the global south? It's not a good term, right? It's not a good term. We know what the first world is, and we know what the developing world is. We know, but no, Russia and China are not part of. Global South is it's this one of these new terms that like some postmodern professor invented, and that's what we're supposed to say now. And I don't like it, right? Because Russia is definitely not in the South, right? There's southern Russia, but there's not, I don't know, there's Russia's up there in the Arctic. Is that the South? Is the global South in the Arctic? It's just a silly term. It doesn't make any sense, right? So yeah, I just, and what about North Korea? Is North Korea in the South? It's north of China. It's one of those words. It doesn't geographically make sense. All right. All right. What has the USA accomplished in Afghanistan? Well, I have long maintained that the purpose of U.S. military presence in Afghanistan was to use Afghanistan as a strategic epicenter of instability, right? Afghanistan is right there, and, up north is Russia, south of it is Iran, and to the west of it is China, right? Or to the east of it is China, right? To the east of it is China, right? So, and ever since the USA invaded Afghanistan, it has been a mess of drug cartels, terrorist groups, opium, and that opium has spilled over into Iran and killed Iranians. The terrorist groups, Jindallah, the separatists, the Sunni separatists, they operate in Afghanistan and attack Iran, right? You got terrorist groups all throughout Central Asia fighting against Russia, bringing heroin into Russia. You got China, they got the Uyghur regions right there. And that I have long maintained that the purpose of the United States being in Afghanistan is to keep it unstable and have that instability spill over the various borders. That's why the USA is in Afghanistan, to keep it unstable. And they've been doing a great job of that. They've been keeping Afghanistan unstable, whereas Iran and China have a plan for trade and transport. They want to bring railway in, they want to develop it. And that's what the USA does not want. They do not want there to be economic development in Afghanistan, because that would lead to an end to the chaos that is geopolitically strategic. They want the drug gangs, the terrorism, the warlords, all of that from Afghanistan to spill across Eurasia, right? That's what they want. Zbigniew Brzezinski wrote a whole book called The Grand Chessboard about Eurasia, and how they can use Eurasia as a strategic epicenter of chaos. And how they can quote unquote keep the barbarians killing each other, i.e. cause instability throughout Eurasia, throughout Central Asia, right, and to spread, and to weaken Russia and China and the other countries. This is geopolitics. This is geopolitics at its finest. I'm sorry, I'm getting tired and everything's not coming out as clearly as it does. But this is geopolitics, and that they've talked about, what about the the minerals, right, and that are very valuable in Afghanistan. Well, that's the fear, right? If China were to go in there and start utilizing those mineral resources, then what would happen was there would be jobs, and there would be economic stability, and the opium drug dealers would go out of business, and people wouldn't join terrorist groups, and then the USA wouldn't have the instability it wants. All the countries the USA invades and topples the government, Libya, right, Iraq, Afghanistan, what do you get? Drug gangs, chaos, and instability, right? And that's basically, in order, you get things that create poverty, things that create instability, because that's what imperialism is. Imperialism is about holding back economic development. It's about driving down living standards, keeping the world poor so that Wall Street and London can stay rich. That's what imperialism is. The imperialists go around the world destabilizing countries, causing chaos, causing instability, overthrowing governments because they don't want economic development. They don't want to see countries rise from poverty. They don't want countries to break free and develop their own industries. They want the world as poor captive markets for the domination of Western corporations. That's what they want. Imperialism is about, is about holding back economic development. That's what imperialism is. Imperialism is holding back economic development, keeping the world poor so that Wall Street and London can stay rich. That's what imperialism is. And so having all kinds of terrorist groups and instability in Afghanistan, right? That's in the interest of the United States. Blowing Iraq to bits, having all kinds of ethnic conflict, blowing Libya to bits, spreading civil war into Syria. This is what the imperialists do, right? And it's a lot like what the Roman Empire did, right? After the war with Carthage, the Roman Empire, they went to Carthage and they ground salt into the soil so that nothing could grow there. That's what the imperialists do. They go to a country and they destroy it so that no strong opposition could emerge, right? A lot of people say the USA failed in Iraq. The USA failed in Afghanistan. No, the USA got exactly what it wanted in all those countries. Stable governments were blown to bits and you got instability and chaos so that imperialism can dominate and there's no emerging opposition to them. They are afraid of Russia and China. They're afraid of Bolivarianism. They're afraid of Baathism. They're afraid of any stable emerging force that could bring development, could raise people out of poverty, and could emerge to become a competitor. They don't want competitors. They want the world to be poor, as a poor captive market they can dump their commodities on. They want all roads to lead to Rome. That's what they want. That's what they want. So there you go. All right, folks. And on that note, I am going to say good night. A new upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have continuously been launching wars of aggression, but the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. While the danger of a new world war still exists and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. While the danger of a new world war still exists and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world